Demon hunters, warring gods, and forgotten worlds await with T&M Comics. Click the links below to enter their fantastical realm. Greetings, mortals. Welcome to another session of the Infernal Court in musical hell. I'm Diva, your judge, jury, executioner, and it is way too soon to be going back to the Disney sequel catalog, especially for Hunchback of Notre Dame 2. I don't think anyone was surprised that Disney opted to soften the edges of notoriously oversexed yet perpetually depressing author Victor Hugo's most well-known novel. What is surprising is how well they made that work, delivering a relatively dark, visually and musically sumptuous film that represents one of the last truly great achievements of the 90s Renaissance. Unfortunately, by deviating from Hugo and not killing off, well, everyone, they left the door open for the Disney television crew to come in and knock out a cheap-ass direct-to-video follow-up. Despite managing to reunite the entire original voice cast, except for Tony Jay due to character death and Mary Wickes due to actual death, the results were so bad that even Disney, who will sell anything they can slap a pair of mouse ears on, sat on it for 5 years. At which point they probably figured, we've already released Journey to a New World and Mulan 2, it's not like we can pretend to have any shame. Get used to that expression. You're going to be using it a lot. Let's examine the case of The Hunchback of Notre Dame 2. We haven't even made it past the vanity plate and already the music's telling me this is going to be a painful ride. I half expect the Who's to come Fahu-forcing through here at any moment. But instead we get Clopin, who for some reason is edging towards Maurice Chevalier in the accent category, leading the preparations for the Festival d'Amour, which I guess is a kind of medieval Valentine's Day? I don't know, I guess after the Parisians cleaned Frollo's scorched and splattered corpse off the pavement, they decided they could throw as many parties as they wanted to in his absence, complete with crappy songs.
Your song is in the air. What magic will you make for us? Whose name shall I declare?
Yeah, Bells of Notre Dame this ain't. And speaking of things that ain't, let's discuss sin number 1, the horrendous animation. I feel like I owe Beauty and the Beast, The Enchanted Christmas an apology, because it looks like fucking Fantasia compared to this crap. It's not even Disney television series quality. This is the sort of stuff you would see in a mockbuster company's cheap knockoff attempt to cash in on whatever intellectual property Disney is working on at the moment. Considering that Hunchback is one of the studio's most stunningly animated features, and that's really saying something, the shittiness on display here cannot be overstated. Quasimodo is doing a lot better for himself these days, mingling freely with the locals and acting as the cool uncle to Phoebus and Esmeralda's son Zephyr. On the downside, he's still sharing his loft apartment with those annoying gargoyles. Also, he's not too chipper about the whole Festival d'Amour thing, because there's this big deal where the cathedral rings this big jewel-encrusted bell called La Fidèle, and people gather in the town square to shout the name of their true love. Quasimodo doesn't have one of those, and he's all angst-woe about it. But BFF Esmeralda is here to remind Quasimodo that someday he'll meet a woman who will look at him and see a hobbit, I guess. And speak of the angel, a circus has just come to town.
Come one, come all, to Cirque du Sarouche.
Cirque du Sarouche? Dude, there are some copyright lawyers in Montreal who want to have a long talk with you right now. Sarouche is the ringleader of this particular carnival, but his spiel is ruined when his assistant Madeline fails to put in an appearance because she's busy practicing the trick she'll use in the finale to save somebody, probably Esmeralda's dopey kid. It doesn't count as a spoiler if everyone in the universe can see it coming. Sarouche only values Madeline as a pretty face and also as an informant, as he instructs her to scope out the location of La Fidèle.
Why?
Because I mean to steal it, silly. I'll be rich.
Let's take a moment to talk about Sarouche and why he is sin number 2. Like the animation, the main antagonist represents a huge drop in quality from this movie's predecessor. It's clear that the writers were trying to give Sarouche and Madeline a similar relationship that Quasimodo had with Frollo, with Sarouche styling himself as Madeline's benefactor despite using and abusing her. He also draws a lot on Gaston's comical vanity. But what made Gaston and Frollo particularly effective villains was their ability to convince other people that they were in the right, getting them to accept or even emulate their cruelties. Sarouche isn't capable of that level of manipulation, and considering he's supposed to be something of a con artist, that's a major failing for his character. His primary motivation of stealing La Fidèle is also rather ridiculous. See, the thing about La Fidèle is that it looks like a bland, ordinary bell on the outside, but on the inside it's all covered with gold and jewels and other shinies.
Metaphor.
Leaving aside the acoustic problems inherent in that concept, why would anyone waste all of that wealth on the interior of a bell almost nobody's going to see? The Catholic Church does love its ostentation, but they usually have it out where the masses can appreciate it. Not to mention the fact that trying to abscond with a giant gold-lined bell would probably end like Pinky and the Brain's attempt to raid Fort Knox. But I'm getting ahead of myself on the stupid, so let's move on for now. Sarouche sends Madeline to wheedle La Fidèle's location out of the cathedral bell ringer, so she heads into Notre Dame's depressingly under-realized interior. But even though Quasimodo was happily socializing with the crowds earlier, he doesn't have the spoons for this particular encounter, despite the gargoyle's attempts to play matchmaker.
What's so funny?
Nothing, it's just... It looks like you're wearing a really big hat. It's a brass beret. A 2-ton topper.
A chapeau in C-sharp.
This will have to pass for flirting. But Madeline freaks and runs off when she gets a look at Quasimodo, which puts a pretty big damper on the mood. Not so much so that Quasimodo doesn't immediately start carving a likeness of her for his HO scale Paris and singing a melodically deficient I Want song.
It's an ordinary miracle, the kind you find around you every single day. Or maybe it's just seasonal like spring and May.
Sin number 3 for said song, Ordinary Miracle. It sounds like it was written by someone with second-hand knowledge of Sondheim trying to imitate his style.
Imagine someone to love who loves you.
Also, lame knockoff of iconic shot from the original film. But Quasimodo is eventually persuaded to visit Madeline at her job, so he gets dressed up in his 15th century fop best and heads to the carnival. Esmeralda and the fam come with, but Phoebus spoils the mood by microaggressioning all over the place.
I don't trust these people.
What does that mean?
Well, just look at them. I mean, they travel from town to town like...
Gypsies?
Yes. No. I mean,
Meanwhile, Madeline is complaining to Sarouche about having to flirt with the deformed bell ringer, and he forces her to stick with the plan by bringing up her backstory. Basically, she tried stealing from him when she was a starving 6-year-old street urchin, and he's been holding it over her ever since. Later, while Sarouche borrows a page from Siegfried and Roy's old playbook, his henchmen not so subtly pickpocket the audience.
Keep a sharp watch. See the creature disappear.
After the show, Madeline reluctantly tails Quasimodo again, so she gets to see him doing his cool uncle thing.
You mean you'll never leave me all alone, will always be a double we two?
That's the arithmetic, I'd stick with you.
The song is stupid, but it's short. Not short enough to get left off the sin count, but still. Anyway, Quasimodo being good with kids is enough to get Madeline to go from horrified to smitten. Hey, the movie's an hour and 5 minutes. We don't have enough time for actual character development, especially with more lame wordplay to get in.
You mean hocus there pocus? Delusion there illusion?
abracadabra?
The end result is that Quasimodo awkwardly asks Madeline out on a date, and she awkwardly accepts. Meanwhile, the citizens of Paris have realized they've been robbed and demand Phoebus, who I guess got his job back after the whole disobeying orders and becoming a fugitive from the law thing, to do something about it.
A string of robberies begins the moment the circus comes to town. Coincidence? I don't think so. How many times have I ever been wrong?
Achilles is too good for this movie. Quasimodo takes Madeline on the standard romantic montage date, complete with a visit to another tower. I'm just saying, Quasi, maybe you should vary your hangouts. And the gargoyles celebrate the blossoming romance, how else, with another stupid song.
Falling in love. Falling in love.
No, go past this part. In fact, never play this again.
Eventually, the date ends with a visit to La Fidèle in all its gaudy glory.
I've never met anyone like you, Quasimodo. I mean, you understand the world better than anyone I've ever known.
Which is quite an accomplishment, considering Quasimodo spent pretty much his entire life isolated from the world by his abusive guardian, who fed him all sorts of twisted views on religion and race and Lord of Darkness only knows what else. Now would be a good time to talk about sin number 5, which is that this movie only exists to give Quasimodo a girlfriend. One of the things that sets Disney's Hunchback apart from the rest of their canon, and indeed from a lot of movies in general, is that it's a story that validates the so-called friend zone. Quasimodo has a crush on Esmeralda, unsurprising since she's the first woman to give him positive attention in ever, but she falls in love with Phoebus instead. Not because Quasimodo isn't worthy of her love or she doesn't recognize that worth, it's just where her heart leads her. And yeah, he's pretty sore about that. But he gets over it and still does the right thing. Not because it's going to earn him romance points, but because it is the right thing, and he's able to recognize Esmeralda's value as a friend and a human being. His ability to fight for her with no thought of personal reward and ultimately rejoice in her happiness is what makes him a genuinely good person, not just a self-proclaimed nice guy. With that in mind, I can understand why the writers would want to let Quasimodo have a romance of his own, but it should be something that emerges organically from the story itself, not its be-all, end-all. Because it doesn't, the story becomes a clumsy framework for the usual couple meets under false pretenses, they fall in love, minor drama when deception is revealed, reconciliation and happy ending beats, and Madeline never emerges as a character in her own right, just someone who exists to fall in love with Quasimodo. The fact that he's deserving of being loved doesn't make her any less of a trophy. Being inexperienced on the whole love thing, Quasimodo seeks advice from Esmeralda, whose act has become a lot more child-friendly since we last saw it. Must be a motherhood thing. Esmeralda, sensible platonic bestie that she is, tells Quasi to just come out and tell his crush how he feels, but their tete-a-tete is interrupted by Phoebus coming in to be a dick.
Those people...
Those people? How can you lump people together like that?
But the gypsies weren't guilty of crimes like these circus people.
Madeline's not. She's different.
Well, maybe. And maybe she's just using you to get something else.
I feel like Phoebus, well, Disney canon Phoebus, he's a huge ass in the book, deserved a lot better than he gets in this movie. He could be ridiculous and a bit pompous at times, but his heart was in the right place, and of the 3 male leads, he had the least overt prejudice towards the Romani to deal with. This Phoebus is basically every thick-skulled male sitcom lead married to a woman who's too beautiful and smart for him. The power of badly written love has given Madeline the strength to wash her hands of Sarouche, but he pulls the old do as I say or I hurt your proto-boyfriend routine and forces her to lead Quasimodo away from the bell tower so Sarouche and his Commedia dell'arte henchmen can steal La Fidèle. So she goes on that errand while the circus prepares to make a quick getaway, and Phoebus comes investigating just while Sarouche is salivating over his ill-gotten gains.
Captain!
I'm here about a rash of robberies.
A rash? Ooh. I find a little soothing lotion does wonders for the complexion.
Look, Disney, I know these shout-outs are a big deal with you, but you need to stop reminding your audience of the much better movies in their video collection they could be watching instead of this one. Phoebus is able to find the one necklace Sarouche couldn't stash in his magic box, so Sarouche frames Madeline for the crime. So while Phoebus searches for her, Zephyr and Jolly tail Sarouche and his henchmen on their larcenous errand and sin number 7, the whole heist thing, starting with the execution thereof.
Adve mysterium, obscuro tintinavulum, mirable visu, ecce hoc facto!
It would have made more sense and been a lot more interesting if Sarouche had been able to borrow La Fidèle for a show and used his knack for illusion to steal it from under everybody's noses. Here, with nobody watching except for the gargoyles, who've been caught under a bell due to their own stupidity, it's just a bizarre affectation. Laverne, having custody of the one brain in the group, summons Quasimodo back to the tower by ringing the downed bell. Not how acoustics work, but okay. So he and Madeline show up just as the theft is discovered. Phoebus immediately suspects Sarouche, even though he was ready to pin everything on Madeline half a minute ago, and Quasimodo immediately goes into third act miscommunication mode.
I wanted to tell you, I tried.
You used me. Which
No,
one is La
please.
Fidèle? Let's go for a walk. You never cared about me.
And yeah, he's being a jerk for the sake of drama here, but why couldn't Madeline have told him the truth before this? There's no indication that Sarouche is having anyone keep tabs on her. There's no reason why their walking out couldn't have easily turned into a nice long talk with Quasimodo's good friend, the captain of the guard. Madeline is arrested, Quasimodo goes and has a good pity cry on the bell tower steps, but he doesn't have time to feel sorry for himself as the gargoyles tell him that Zephyr has gone after the bad guys. Quasimodo goes to warn Phoebus and Esmeralda while they're overseeing the lockdown of the city, and Madeline tips them off to Sarouche's escape plan.
It's the same as the disappearing elephant. There was always a tunnel under the stage.
Oh, of course, he smuggled the bell out through a tunnel. That's connected to the top of the Notre Dame bell tower.
What?
Esmeralda realizes that Sarouche must be escaping through the catacombs, but Phoebus refuses to believe Madeline because he's holding the idiot ball, and also it hasn't yet occurred to him to search the massive underground tunnel complex where an entire ethnic group was hiding out from the law in the first movie. Eventually he agrees, on the condition that Madeline comes along to ensure her good behavior. By this time, Zephyr has been discovered by the villains, but Jolly escapes, so he's able to pull a Timmy's trapped in the well and lead them to the bad guys. But Sarouche has read up on his stock tropes as well, and he uses the kid for hostage material.
Don't test me, Captain.
Madeline convinces Quasimodo to untie her so she can pull her Chekhov skill out and save Zephyr. Luckily, Sarouche is so busy with his Rafiki impression that he doesn't notice Madeline doing her tightrope act until it's too late. Sarouche is arrested, Zephyr is reunited with his parents, and La Fidèle rings at the Festival d'Amour as everyone proclaims their love, including Phoebus and Esmeralda, Hugo and Esmeralda's goat, Achilles and a random lady horse, and of course Quasimodo and his officially designated romantic prize.
Yuck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yuck.
Take everything you loved about Disney's adaptation of Hunchback, the magnificent visuals, the epic music, the horrifying villain, the bittersweet story, and then chuck it all in the bin because you're sure as here not going to find any of it in this movie. Lots of Disney sequels are disappointing, but there aren't many that don't even understand what was good about its predecessor, let alone fail to achieve it. The only reason it doesn't rank any higher on the sin count is because it's too short to pack any more issues into it. Therefore, the Court of Musical Hell orders the following punishments. For the unbelievably crappy production values, the animation staff is condemned to sit through all the Swan Princess sequels. For trying to be clever with the songs and failing miserably, Skip Kennan and Carl Johnson are condemned to perform the entire score of Sunday in the Park with George by themselves, unaccompanied. Finally, for a screenplay that understands so little of its sources, both cinematic and literary, Jules Selbo, Flip Colber, and Cindy Marcus are condemned to spend eternity reading the boring filler sections of Les Miserables. So let it be recorded. This session of the Infernal Court in musical hell is now adjourned.